Daniel Andrews has flagged a further easing of restrictions.
Life will feel getting back to normal.
What I'd like them to have for Christmas is their lives back.
But for Aussies living with disability, reopening spells fear.
For us, it was terrifying. People with disabilities are much more likely to die. For example, in the UK, they made up about 60% of all deaths, despite making up only 17% of the total population.
Despite their priority status, only 64.8% of NDIS participants over 16 have received their first jab. And in a scathing report this week, the Disability Royal Commission has pinned the blame squarely on the Federal Department of Health, finding a failure to consult relevant groups in the disability sector and a failure to provide accessible information, creating confusion, uncertainty and a loss of trust.
Whilst theoretically vaccination appointments have been available, there's just not been the reach out needed and the communications needed.
Most damning, people with disabilities in residential care were quietly bumped down the vaccine queue in early March. Residents and their advocates only finding out about that decision in late April. The NDIS minister's adamant things have improved since then, while the Federal Health Minister's looking on the bright side.
Our rate of loss of life is one of the lowest in the world. And for those with a disability in residential accommodation, their double vaccinated rate is 14% higher than the national average.
It's still not high enough though. The Royal Commission recommending restrictions remain until all people with disability and disability workers have had a proper chance to get jabbed. But with lockdown fatigue growing and the purse strings tightening, will our leaders be willing to wait that long?
I think we need to reflect on who we are as a society. If we're opening early with many clinically vulnerable people at risk, then what does that say about how much we care for our fellow citizens?
Well, Kurt Fearnley is among our greatest ever Paralympians and he joins us now. Kurt, some of these failures, they're just shocking. What was your reaction when you read the report?
Yeah, it was pretty hard reading. I think as many people with disabilities, you read through there and parts of them were overwhelming. You know, when you live with disability has its quirks, you know, like not even I, who I've lived with a disability my entire life. And sometimes it feels like you don't know your own body in certain situations. You don't know your own vulnerability. But I got to a point in that report and I found one line that said that we need people with disabilities to champion the vaccine rollout. And everything was so overwhelming, but I saw that and I thought, hey, I can do that. I can talk about that. I can encourage people to get vaccinated. And that's what I've been doing from the moment that I read it. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care whether it's Labor, Liberal, Greens or One Nation. You can get vaccinated because it's the right thing to do. And you can do it today because Australia, we look after each other and we do what's right.
It's really well said, Kurt. And it's interesting hearing you talk about it like that because the report has a lot to do with what's gone wrong in the rollout, and we'll come to those issues in a moment. But the way you're talking seems to be appealing to people to make the decision to get vaccinated themselves. Have you detected that there is vaccine hesitancy among disabled Australians?
We've experienced, we all know people who are vaccine hesitant, whether it's hesitant to do it because you're scared of the very low chance of risk that's associated with it, the minuscule risk. There is hesitant because you don't want a sore arm tomorrow. But look, when we open up, COVID will come into our community. It will travel through the community and it will wind its way to those who are most vulnerable.
Well, the vaccination rate, Kurt, in the disability sector is higher than the national average. If that remains the case, would you be comfortable with things opening up at 80%?
I think things are opening up at 80%. The last 18 months, we've shared the brunt of COVID together. Even after opening up, we're not going to share that brunt evenly amongst the community. We need to push that as far up as we can. The report spoke about wanting to get every person with a disability who is able to be vaccinated. It spoke about the desire to get 100% of those with disabilities vaccinated.
Kurt, we're so thrilled that you've come on. You give voice to so many people who don't think they have a voice. But I also want to know, do you have a message for people outside the disability sector who maybe feel like this doesn't really affect them?
Whether or not you work with disability, if you do, please get vaccinated. If you don't, call somebody who you know who works in that space. But also recognise your part that you play in our community. The chains of transmission will not go directly to those who have lived experience with disability, to those who are vulnerable. It could go through you. Take yourself out of that chain by getting vaccinated and encourage as many people as you can. The time is ticking. We are going to open up, and we just need to make sure those who are most vulnerable are as protected as possible, and you might be the solution. So please get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated.
Well, hopefully anyone who's watching tonight who's hesitant or on the fence has heard you loud and clear, Kurt. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.